Mission on the Hill. From Do You Believe in Nightmares Number 2, January 1958, cursed to sail the seas of madness. As they came out of the cottage, Jeff Clayton threw a wry glance at his companion. You're foolish, Rob, to attempt to climb like that. Besides, think of it, man, you've been invited to my brother's wedding. It's hardly polite to Down in the village, down the long green slope, the tall white spire of the church trembled to the peal of bells. But Rob Martner didn't hear them. He didn't even seem to hear Jeff Clayton's voice. Martner's eyes stirred restlessly away from the small fishing town, ran darkly up the slope, and fixed on the steep granite cliff behind the town. It towered crazily out to sea, and above its majestic craggy peak, wild seabirds wheeled and cawed. He had no eyes, no ears for the birds, only the gray, weathered cottage that hung on the peak's edge like a witch's hat. I'm sorry, Jeff, I can't go, Martner said finally. His voice had a dreamlike quality to it suddenly. It isn't that I want to slight Henry and Amy. It's just that I want to climb the cliff. A forced note of humor entered his voice. After all, I'm here in Barry Port to relax. Jeff, that's why I retired, came here. I think I'll start by finding out what the inside of that cottage looks like. The view from the seaward side must be magnificent. Have it your way, Jeff Clayton said distastefully. But if you'll take my advice, you'll leave Captain Martner strictly alone. As for the view, no one. Jeff stopped abruptly, as though he'd said too much. It is remarkable about the similarity in name, isn't it? Rob Martner said slowly. Now the high old house was mirrored in his eyes. I suppose the captain and I are related somewhere back along the line. Plenty of Martners used to live here in Barryport. Perhaps the captain and I can talk it over. Clayton looked at his friend helplessly. Rob, he said finally, no one, so far as I know, has ever climbed that cliff and come back. No one except the captain, anyway. Nonsense, Rob said. It's just a few thousand feet. The ascent isn't overly steep. It just requires endurance, that's all. All right, then, I'll tell you, Jeff Clayton said grimly. And if you want to go up there after I've finished... Well, he paused and then continued. Only 2 men in the past 10 years have even attempted scaling the cliff, and both of them made it. Only, Jeff's voice cracked. Both fell into the sea just where the ledge road turns the cliff edge. He pointed. Rob saw it, a thin ribbon of gouged rock winding up the face of the cliff. Bad nerves, he said, but he couldn't hide the sudden note of tension in his voice. Then he shook himself vigorously. But I'm going anyway. I like the atmosphere of Barryport, Jeff. It's wholesome, it's clean, it's redolent of the sea. Often back in the city, I wished my parents had stayed here. I'd have liked to be a sailor, owned a schooner, and sailed the seas. After all, you have. He pointed to a 30-foot single master riding at anchor in the harbor. That's Captain Martner's craft, isn't it? Jeff shuddered. He nodded and got into the car. Rob started walking along the spine of the grassy rise that led to the cliffside trail. At first, he was exhilarated by the sheer daring of the climb. Then, halfway up, he began tiring. The task was harder than it had seemed, and the gray house drew nearer only with infinite slowness. At last, he reached the spot from which Jeff said 2 others had fallen to their deaths. Idly, he wondered why. The road carved from the living rock of the cliff itself was over a yard wide at that point. Of course, it wasn't entirely level. It tended to spill off toward the sea, roaring 1,000 feet below, with the wind whipping around him. Rob took a deep breath and rounded the curve. He didn't hear the rock splitting beneath him until he'd passed. Then the slow grumble reached his ears, and he looked back, blanching. Behind him, a good 6 feet of the trail had disappeared. God, that was close, he muttered, drawing back against the sheer rock wall. He didn't hear the segment of trail hit the water, but he saw the splash, leaning dizzily forward. Then he looked up. Before him, the trail was clear, and he couldn't go back. Not now, anyway. The only way clear was to the top. The trail grew steeper. About his head, the wild seabirds fluttered, shrieking their nameless cries. Looking up, he saw the sky suddenly overcast. A brisker wind sprang up from the tossing, black waters. He just made the lip of the cliff in time. Another few minutes and the wind would have blown him over. Then the cottage squatted before him. He had to push against the wind across whipping, tall grass to reach it. He fumbled with the ancient door latch. The door smashed back. An instant later, he stood within, in the semi-darkness of the heated interior, lit only by the roaring flames of a fire. His eyes swept the room. "Empty, by God," he said. Then he gave a start as a figure stirred in the old captain's chair by the fire. A thin chuckle oozed from the shadows. "Not empty. Rob, not empty yet. I'm here." "The captain?" "Aye, Rob, old Captain Martner." The old man's voice was like the dry rustle of wind over dead leaves. He didn't start up, but waved Rob to another chair before the flames. "A hard climb it was, eh, lad?" Rob Martner sat down and stared. His eyes roved over the bony, emaciated figure, the narrow, pinched gray face with its sparse gray beard, and then down at the thin brown hands. The captain's chair creaked, rocking slowly. Rob's eyes came back to the captain's glittering eyes. He felt the strength drain from his limbs. Abruptly, the power of movement was gone. All he could do was speak. "You know my name?" he croaked. "But how? I just knew it. Rob, I guess we're related, you and I. And I've been expecting you, Rob, ever since you came to report. A good move that was, Rob, fortunate for me." "For you? I'm dying." Rob. The withered old lips scarcely moved. The eyes glittered on, unwavering, fixed, hypnotic. Rob, the road fell beneath you?" A cold chill crawled down Rob Martner's back. How did you know that?" he asked. "You say you're dying. We've never met, yet you know me by name, even know something you couldn't have seen." "I know, Rob, I know, that's all. I've got to be getting back." "You won't be leaving, lad," the captain said dryly. "Not until after I'm dead, at least. And even then you might want to stay a while and think, for you'll have a job to do by then." You mean to keep me here? Kill me like. "I didn't kill the other two who climbed here, Rob. They murdered themselves. Or rather, a yarn of mine did. Once they'd heard it, the agony of life it told made them take their own. But you're stronger stuff, Rob. You can hear that tale and live." There was a ghostly chuckle. "You're a Martner, Rob." "What tale?" Rob Martner asked with a thrill of horror. The withered old mouth parted in a hideous grin. "The rhyme of the ancient mariner, Rob. It is a tale we Martners must tell forever." "Mariner Martner." Rob's blood froze. He tried to rise, to break the paralysis in which the old man's eyes held him, but fell back, helpless. The ancient lips writhed, and the tale began. "It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three, by thy long grey beard and glittering eye. Now wherefore stopp'st thou me? The bridegroom's doors are opened wide, and I am next of kin. The quests are met, the feast is set. Mayst hear the merry din." He listened, thinking of Hank Clayton's wedding. He'd never be a guest now. He was doomed to listen to the ancient mariner, doomed to take his place when the tale was done and Captain Martner died, doomed perhaps to sail the seas until— The captain paused, the glitter in his eyes fading. "Aye, Rob, I know what you're thinking. You've guessed your mission, lad," he cackled in his high-pitched voice. "But you always wanted to be a seaman, didn't you, Rob?" There was a dry, deathly chuckle. "You'll have plenty of time now, Rob. You'll have my house, my boat to sail in and tell your tale wherever you go, whenever the agony comes on you, lad, for it comes, Rob, and it never beats until the story's told. Now sleep, sleep, for when you wake, I'll be dead and you will be the ancient mariner." Rob tried desperately to keep his eyes from closing, but they dropped, slowly, like coffin lids. Through the lulling waves of oncoming sleep, he heard the captain's cracked voice take up the tale again, fade slowly on the last stanza of the famous poem. "He went like one that hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn. A sadder and a wiser man, he rose in the morrow morn." The end.
The preceding thrilling story has presented for your enjoyment. This classic work is now in the public domain, making it freely available to be shared and appreciated by all. Some elements may appear outdated or insensitive by today's standards, but we present this work in its original form to preserve its historical context and literary significance. Sit back, relax, and indulge in this timeless tale. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Every bit helps this channel grow. Thank you.